The signature looked nothing like hers. Evelyn Carmichael stares at the document on her dining room table, tracing the rushed scrawl at the bottom of page 1 with her index finger. 6 days ago, she signed something. She remembers Gerald Hutchins, their financial advisor of 22 years, spreading papers across this same table, talking fast about Claire's situation and protective measures. She remembers her hands shaking as she wrote her name. What she doesn't remember is agreeing to give him control of everything. Now their accounts are frozen. The gardener went home unpaid this morning, Winston's hands trembling as his debit card was declined for the 3rd time. The pharmacy rejected her card when she tried to pick up his blood pressure medication. Their daughter is 2,000 miles away in Boston, recovering from a mastectomy, and they can't even pay their own bills. In the kitchen, the woman from the agency, hired by Claire before her surgery, sets down a leather messenger bag and asks a single question. "Do you have copies of what you signed?" Desiree Thompson doesn't look like the warm, grandmotherly caregiver they expected. She looks like someone who came prepared for war. When Evelyn hands her the manila folder, Desiree opens it with surgical precision. Her eyes scan the first page. Her jaw tightens. And when she looks up, something in her expression makes Evelyn sit straighter in her chair. "This isn't a protection order," Desiree says quietly, pulling out her phone. "This is a weapon." Have you ever watched someone you trusted turn your vulnerability into their opportunity? Have you ever felt your competence questioned simply because you needed help? Stay with us to witness how 2 elderly people, armed with nothing but spreadsheets and index cards, reclaim their lives one documented phone call at a time, and how the woman everyone dismissed as just the maid taught them that evidence speaks louder than authority. Winston Carmichael's hand trembled as the card reader beeped for the 3rd time. Red letters. Declined. Miguel Rodriguez shifted his weight on the driveway, garden shears still in hand. 12 years he'd maintained their hibiscus and citrus trees. 12 years of Tuesdays at 8:45. "I don't understand." Winston tried his other card. The reader beeped again. His engineering mind, trained over 40 years at JPL to solve satellite communication failures, couldn't process this simple transaction error. Let me check with Evelyn." Inside their Pasadena tutor, his wife stood at the kitchen counter with the phone pressed to her ear, her librarian's patience wearing thin with Wells Fargo's hold music. When the representative finally answered, Evelyn's careful notation habits kicked in. She wrote, "Accounts under protective review per authorized Representative Gerald Hutchins." "But we didn't authorize..." She stopped. Gerald's visit last week. The papers on this same table. His reassuring voice talking about Claire, about protection, about temporary measures while their daughter underwent treatment in Boston. Winston appeared in the doorway, Miguel's apologetic face visible behind him through the screen. "Ev?" She covered the mouthpiece. "They say Gerald put a hold on everything." The pharmacy called at 10:15. Winston's blood pressure medication declined. They'd been married 52 years. Evelyn had never heard that particular note in her husband's voice before, the one that meant his hands would shake all afternoon. Miguel left unpaid, promising it could wait, his kindness somehow making the humiliation worse. By 11, they sat at the dining room table surrounded by unopened bills and that blinking answering machine neither had the energy to check. Winston methodically sorted papers, his engineer's need for order the only thing keeping panic at bay. Gerald's business card surfaced. Hutchins Financial Advisory, trusted partner since 2003. 22 years. He'd been their advisor for 22 years. "What did we sign?" Evelyn asked. Winston couldn't remember. Just Gerald's concerned face, his talk about Claire's situation, about getting protections in place. The signing had felt routine, professional. Gerald's notary waiting in the car, Gerald apologizing for the rush. Claire's diagnosis 3 weeks ago had fractured time itself. Days blurred into sleepless nights, meals forgotten, normal routines abandoned. Their only child, 2,000 miles away, facing a mastectomy and chemotherapy. Every phone call from Boston left them hollowed out. The answering machine blinked. 7 messages. Winston pressed play. Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael, this is Karen from Senior Care Solutions. We're confirming your new caregiver starts today at 11. Claire arranged everything before her surgery. If you need to reschedule, the doorbell rang. Evelyn opened it to find a woman in her 50s, professional clothing, leather messenger bag over one shoulder. Not the soft-spoken grandmother type Claire had mentioned. Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael? I'm Desiree Thompson. Desiree Thompson cataloged the Carmichael home in 30 seconds. Medical bills stacked on the entry table, dead flowers in a vase, 2 coffee cups abandoned mid-morning, and the particular quality of silence that meant something had recently broken. I apologize for the chaos, Evelyn said immediately, that librarian's instinct to manage disorder. We weren't expecting. That is, Claire arranged this. But with everything happening, may I come in? They led her to the kitchen where Winston stood with the phone, still trying to reach someone at the bank who could explain. Desiree set her messenger bag on the counter, textbooks visible inside. California elder law stamped on one spine. I know Claire mentioned I'm with the agency, Desiree said, her directness cutting through their apologetic stammering. What she may not have mentioned is I'm completing my paralegal certificate at Pasadena Community College. 2nd semester, focus on elder advocacy. She pulled out a yellow legal pad. I've worked elder care for 8 years while going to school. Before we discuss meal planning, I need to understand what's happening with your accounts. Winston's engineer brain, desperate for structure, latched onto her systematic approach. He described the frozen accounts, the declined cards, Gerald's assurance this was temporary protection. When exactly did Gerald visit? Desiree's pen moved. Last week, Tuesday, I think. Winston looked to Evelyn. Tuesday the 18th, Evelyn confirmed. Around 10:30, he stayed maybe 15 minutes. What reason did he give for the visit? Claire. Evelyn's voice caught. He'd heard about her diagnosis. Wanted to check on us, said we should get protections in place so she wouldn't worry about our finances during treatment. Did he bring documents? Winston nodded slowly. Papers to sign. He said his notary was waiting outside, apologized for rushing us. Desiree's expression didn't change, but something in her stillness sharpened. Do you have copies of what you signed? Winston retrieved a manila folder from the stack on the dining table. Gerald had left it, labeled Carmichael, financial protection documents. Desiree opened it with the careful precision of someone who'd seen this before. Her eyes scanned the first page once, then again. Her jaw visibly tightened. This isn't a protection order. She looked up at them. This is a weapon? The Carmichaels stared at her. It's a durable financial power of attorney. It names Gerald Hutchins as your agent, with authority to manage, control, and direct all your financial assets and accounts. She pointed to the date. Signed 6 days ago. Notarized by... She checked the seal. Cynthia Park, whose business address is Gerald's office. But Gerald said, Winston began, I need you to tell me exactly how this signing happened. Every detail you remember. As they described Gerald's rushed visit, Desiree pulled out her phone and began photographing every page of the document, including the notary seal. When she finished, she wrote on an index card in clear block letters, tomorrow. Request account statements. Call bank fraud department. Document everything. She propped it against the salt shaker on their kitchen table. Desiree's finger traced the first paragraph, her expression hardening with each line. The Carmichaels watched her read with the growing awareness that whatever they'd signed wasn't what Gerald had described. "This document," Desiree said carefully, "grants Gerald Hutchins complete authority to manage, control, and direct all your financial assets and accounts." She looked up. "It's a durable power of attorney. Do you understand what that means?" Winston's engineering mind seized on the word durable. Permanent. Not temporary protection, not a brief freeze during Claire's treatment. But Gerald said, Evelyn began. "I need you to tell me exactly what Gerald said. Every word you remember." They sat at the kitchen table. The document spread between them like evidence at a crime scene. Winston described Gerald's unannounced visit, his concerned questions about Claire, his suggestion that they needed protections in place, the way he'd kept glancing at his watch, the notary waiting in the car. "How long did the signing take?" Desiree asked. "Maybe 10 minutes." Winston's hands started trembling again. He apologized for rushing, said his next appointment was across town. Desiree pulled out her phone and began photographing each page methodically. Click. The signature page. Click. The notary seal from Cynthia Park, business address matching Gerald's office. Click. The clause granting Gerald authority over their retirement accounts, their home equity, their investment portfolio. "The timing matters," Desiree said, still photographing. "Claire's diagnosis was 3 weeks ago?" 22 days, Evelyn confirmed. Her librarian's precision with dates was automatic, even through shock. "And Gerald visited 6 days ago, right after you told him about Claire's surgery?" The implication landed like a physical blow. Winston had called Gerald to explain why they might be slow returning his calls. A courtesy notification to their advisor of 22 years. Gerald had shown up 2 days later with papers. Desiree finished photographing and pulled up a website on her phone. California Secretary of State, Notary Public Verification. She entered Cynthia Park's name and commission number from the seal. "Active license," she confirmed. "Commission to Gerald's office address." She looked at them directly. "This isn't protection. This is control. And the timing, targeting you during a family medical crisis, that's a red flag for financial exploitation." The word exploitation hung in the air between them. "But we've known Gerald for 22 years, Desiree finished, which makes this worse, not better. He used that trust." She stood, found an index card in her messenger bag, and wrote in clear block letters, "Tomorrow. Request account statements. Call bank fraud department. Document everything." She propped it against the salt shaker where they couldn't miss it. "We're going to fix this," Desiree said. "But first you need to understand what happened. Gerald didn't help you. He took control during the worst week of your lives. That wasn't kindness. It was opportunity." Winston stared at the index card. His engineer's mind, paralyzed by emotional manipulation for days, suddenly had parameters, a system, steps to follow. For the first time since Gerald's visit, he could see the problem clearly. At 4 o'clock, Desiree moved into the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd worked multiple care positions while raising a child alone. She wasn't here to mother them. The Carmichaels recognized that immediately. She was here to work. "We're doing an inventory," she announced, pulling chicken from their refrigerator. "While I make dinner, I need you to list every account you have, every automatic payment, every bill due in the next 30 days. Evelyn retrieved her address book. Actual paper, alphabetically tabbed, maintained with librarian precision since 1987. She began writing. Wells Fargo checking, Wells Fargo savings, Vanguard retirement accounts, the Pasadena Credit Union CD that matured last month. Winston booted up his desktop computer in the den, the machine humming to life after weeks of neglect. He opened Excel, muscle memory from 40 years of aerospace engineering, and created columns: account name, institution, last known balance, automatic withdrawals, due dates. From the kitchen came the sound of a knife on cutting board, the oven preheating. Desiree worked while she talked. "My mother was widowed at 69, she said matter-of-factly. Grief made her vulnerable. My cousin, her nephew, got power of attorney 3 months after my father died. By the time I realized what was happening, she'd lost $127,000. Evelyn looked up from her address book. "Did you get it back?" "No. I was working in Phoenix. By the time I flew home and understood what the paperwork meant, the money was gone and my mother was too ashamed to fight." Desiree's voice didn't waver. "She died 4 years later, broke and broken." Winston stopped typing. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Get angry. Then get organized." Desiree appeared in the doorway. "That's why I'm in school. That's why I recognized Gerald's playbook. I swore I'd never miss the signs again." They worked through dinner. Simple roasted chicken, vegetables, the first real meal either Carmichael had eaten in days. Desiree's phone alarm went off at 6:30. "I have class at 8, she said, packing her messenger bag. "Elder Law, Professor Martinez. We're covering financial abuse statutes." She paused at the door. "Keep working on that inventory. Tomorrow we start making calls." After she left, the house felt different. Not empty, purposeful. Winston returned to his spreadsheet, color-coding accounts by priority. Evelyn cross-referenced their bills against checking account statements from before the freeze. At 9:30, Winston couldn't sleep. He reread the power of attorney document with an engineer's eye for detail. The notary's signature looked rushed. The witness line had only one signature when California law required 2. The date was wrong. Gerald had written April 18th, but Winston's desk calendar showed their actual signing was April 19th. Inconsistencies, documentation failures, evidence. He texted Claire in Boston, "Call when you can. We need to talk about Gerald." Then he added their findings to his spreadsheet, noting every discrepancy with timestamps and page numbers. For the first time since Claire's diagnosis, Winston felt like himself again. Not a confused elderly person, an aerospace engineer documenting system failures. Desiree arrived Wednesday morning carrying 2 coffees and a 3-ring binder with Carmichael case file printed on the spine. Inside, California financial elder abuse statutes highlighted in yellow, Wells Fargo fraud reporting procedures, legal aid contact information, and a blank timeline template with columns for date, event, documentation, and witnesses. "Today we stop reacting," she said, spreading the materials across their dining table. "Today we act." The morning schedule was written on a fresh index card. 9:00 a.m., Wells Fargo Fraud Department. 10:00 a.m., legal aid intake call. 11:00 a.m., draft certified letter revoking POA. At precisely 9 o'clock, Winston dialed Wells Fargo's fraud line with Desiree beside him, coaching in real time. When the specialist answered, Winston's engineering precision took over. "My name is Winston Carmichael. On April 19th, I signed a power of attorney document under circumstances I now understand constitute financial elder abuse. I did not comprehend what I was signing. I was under emotional distress due to my daughter's cancer diagnosis. I revoke all authorization effective immediately. Desiree had taught him those exact phrases. The specialist's tone changed from routine to alert. Mr. Carmichael, can you describe the circumstances of the signing? Winston walked through Gerald's unannounced visit, the rushed time frame, the notary waiting in the car. Desiree slid him a note. Mention the date discrepancy. Winston added that detail. Gerald had written April 18th, but the actual signing occurred April 19th. We're flagging this for investigation, the specialist said. You'll hear from us within 5 to 7 business days. Evelyn typed the interaction into Winston's spreadsheet. Date, time, representative name, case number, outcome. Documentation habits from their professional lives, returning like muscle memory. At 10, they called legal aid. At 11, Evelyn sat at her old typewriter, the one she'd used for 35 years at the library, and drafted their revocation letter in formal, unambiguous language. Desiree proofread it, suggesting only one change, adding without adequate time for review or independent legal counsel to describe the signing conditions. At 2 o'clock, they walked together to the post office, the Carmichaels' first time leaving the house as a unit in 8 days. Winston carried the certified letter in a manila envelope. Evelyn held the completed timeline, now spanning 3 pages with 17 documented events. The postal clerk processed their certified mail receipt. Desiree photographed it with timestamp visible. Walking home, Evelyn said quietly, I keep waiting to feel rescued. But this doesn't feel like rescue. Because it's not, Desiree replied. You're not being saved. You're fighting back. That afternoon, Claire called from Boston, her voice hoarse from her second chemotherapy infusion. Mom, Dad, Desiree sent me her notes. I'm coming home. You finish your treatment, Winston said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. We've got this. After they hung up, Evelyn looked at their dining room table. No longer chaos, but command central. Labeled folders, organized timelines, documented evidence. We do have this, she said, testing the words. Winston added the phone call with Claire to his spreadsheet. Time, duration, topic, outcome. Everything documented, everything tracked. For the first time since Gerald's visit, they weren't victims waiting for help. They were engineers and librarians doing what they'd always done, solving problems with systematic precision. Thursday morning's index card read, Call bank for status update. Record time, representative name, case number. Winston made the call at 9:03 a.m. The Wells Fargo representative couldn't provide details, but confirmed the investigation was active. Winston logged it in his spreadsheet. Column A, date time. Column B, contact. Column C, case number. Column D, outcome. Column E, next action required. 5 to 7 business days, they'd said. That meant waiting. Winston hated waiting. Desiree arrived at 10 with a new assignment. You're going to document your competence, she said, setting down a leather-bound journal for Evelyn. Daily entries, timestamps, current events, anything that demonstrates clear thinking. Evelyn opened to the first page, her librarian's instinct for proper citation taking over. She wrote, Thursday, April 27th, 2023. 10:15 a.m. Desiree Thompson instructed us to maintain evidence journal. President Biden announced infrastructure funding yesterday. Claire's third chemo session is scheduled for May 2nd. Winston's blood pressure medication refilled successfully after a count restoration. Today's LA Times crossword, 47 minutes, completed without assistance. Why crosswords? Winston asked. Because Gerald's petition will claim cognitive decline, Desiree said. Documented puzzle completion with times proves otherwise. By Saturday, their dining room had transformed. Winston's command central, labeled manila folders color-coded by category. Blue for bank correspondence, green for legal documents, yellow for witness statements, red for Gerald's communications. Evelyn created a timeline poster board using techniques from 35 years organizing library archives. Each event got an index card, date, description, documentation source, potential witnesses. The cards formed a visual narrative from Claire's diagnosis through Gerald's exploitation to their current defense. Saturday afternoon, Winston opened the bank statements finally received via branch manager visit. His engineer's eye caught patterns immediately. Small transfers he didn't recognize. $2,500 on March 15th to HFA Consulting. $3,200 on March 28th. Another $4,000 on April 3rd. Desiree, he called. She studied the statements, photographing each page. HFA, Hutchins Financial Advisory? I never authorized these. Add them to the spreadsheet. Calculate the total. We'll send this to Sarah Chen. Winston's hands didn't shake as he created a new worksheet. Unauthorized transactions. Date, amount, recipient, authorization, status. The total climbed, $43,000 over 3 months, all after Claire's diagnosis. Saturday evening, Claire called from Boston. I finished round 2, flying home in 10 days. How are you feeling? Evelyn asked carefully. Tired, scared, but hearing you two sound like yourselves again. Mom, that's helping more than you know. After they hung up, Evelyn added the call to Winston's log. Then she wrote in her journal, Claire sounds stronger. We are no longer the crisis she needs to manage. We are her parents again. Sunday morning, a teenage boy appeared at their door carrying a laptop. Hi, I'm Marcus. Desiree's son? She said Mr. Carmichael might want help making his spreadsheet look more professional. Winston led him to the den. Marcus, 16 and tech fluent, showed him conditional formatting, data validation, pivot tables. Within an hour, Winston's documentation had become a presentation-ready visual analysis. My mom talks about you guys, Marcus said. She's really proud of how you're fighting back. After Marcus left, Winston stared at his transformed spreadsheet. They weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were building a case. Monday morning at 9:15, a courier delivered a thick envelope. Winston signed for it, noting the sender, Vickers and Associates, attorneys at law. Inside, a cease and desist letter on expensive letterhead. Winston's blood pressure spiked reading the first paragraph. Our client, Gerald Hutchins, has been made aware of false and defamatory allegations. The letter claimed the Carmichaels had requested comprehensive financial management due to declining capacity, and warned that household staff may be exercising undue influence over vulnerable clients. Evelyn's hands shook as she read over his shoulder. The letter threatened legal action if they continued interfering with legitimate fiduciary arrangements. She called Desiree immediately. We got a letter from Gerald's lawyer. I'm leaving class now. Desiree arrived 20 minutes later, still carrying her criminal justice textbook. She read the letter with the same forensic attention she'd given the power of attorney, occasionally making notes in the margin of her own copy. He's scared, she said finally. Scared? He's threatening to sue us. Exactly. Why threaten if you're confident? Desiree pulled out her phone. I'm calling Sarah Chen. She reached attorney Sarah Chen at Legal Aid, someone she knew from her paralegal coursework. Sarah asked them to come in Tuesday morning and bring everything. All documentation, the cease and desist, the timeline, Winston's spreadsheet. This is actually good news, Desiree told the shaken Carmichaels after hanging up. Scared people make mistakes. Gerald just made one, putting his false narrative in writing. She photographed the letter from multiple angles, added it to their evidence file, updated the timeline. Then she sat them down at the dining table and pulled out a legal pad. We don't respond emotionally, she said, writing in clear block letters. We respond with facts, dates, and evidence. Every claim he makes, we counter with documentation. Winston watched her create a response outline, teaching them legal strategy the way she'd taught them fraud reporting procedures. This wasn't caregiving. It was advocacy. That evening, their neighbor Barbara Hastings appeared at the door with a casserole. I heard there's some confusion about your finances, she said with performative concern. Gerald mentioned you've been having trouble managing things since Claire's diagnosis. If you need help. Evelyn felt the words land like a physical blow. Gerald was working the neighborhood narrative, painting them as confused elders who needed protection from their own household staff. After Barbara left, Evelyn sat heavily at the kitchen table. People believe him. Some people, Desiree corrected, but not everyone. Not the bank's fraud unit, not Legal Aid, not Miguel or Tom. She added Barbara's visit to the timeline with a note. Community perception management. Evidence of Gerald's isolation campaign. Winston stared at the growing documentation. Gerald's cease and desist wasn't just a threat. It was proof that their evidence was working. The external pressure had officially begun, but so had their systematic defense. And this time they weren't facing it confused and paralyzed. They were facing it with spreadsheets, photographs, and a former librarian's gift for documentation. Gerald had chosen the wrong couple to exploit. The Legal Aid office occupied a cramped second floor above a bodega on Colorado Boulevard. Sarah Chen's desk disappeared beneath case files, but her eyes sharpened as she reviewed the Carmichaels' 3-ring binder. This is the most organized case file I've seen from non-represented clients. She photographed Winston's spreadsheet with her phone. Most people come in with a shoebox of receipts and trauma. You've built evidence. Winston's hands steadied on the table. An attorney was treating his work as legitimate. Sarah explained California's financial elder abuse statutes, the burden of proof for undue influence, the process for challenging durable powers of attorney. Gerald's going to argue you requested comprehensive management. We counter with timeline and witnesses proving exploitation of crisis vulnerability. We have witnesses? Evelyn asked. Everyone who saw your competence before, during, and after. Sarah made notes. Start with people who interact with you regularly. That afternoon, Desiree suggested they document witness statements systematically. Winston called Miguel, their gardener, who arrived that evening still in his work clothes. I remember that Tuesday morning, Miguel said, as Evelyn recorded him on Winston's phone. Your card declined 3 times. You were embarrassed, kept apologizing. But you weren't confused. You were clear something was wrong with the bank. Do you remember seeing Gerald that week? Desiree prompted. Miguel nodded. The week before, I was trimming the front hedge. Saw him through your dining room window, papers spread on the table. He kept checking his watch. Winston added Miguel's statement to a new spreadsheet. Witness testimony log. Name, date, observation, contact information. Thursday morning, their mail carrier Tom knocked during his route. 19 years delivering to this address, he explained. I've brought you a lot of certified mail from Gerald's office over the past 2 months, more than usual. Started right around, he checked his phone's calendar, late March, when you told me about Claire's diagnosis. Evelyn felt something shift. Their ordinary lives had created documentation neither she nor Gerald had anticipated. Tom provided a written statement that afternoon, signed at the UPS store with a notary present. Rosa Rodriguez, Miguel's wife who worked as a hospice nurse, came by Friday evening. She'd met the Carmichaels at a neighborhood party 2 months ago. Evelyn was telling me about Claire's treatment options, Rosa recalled. She'd researched clinical trials, understood the staging system, asked intelligent questions about my patient's experiences with chemo. That's not someone who can't manage her own affairs. By Saturday, they had 6 documented witness statements. Winston created a visual timeline mapping each witness observation to Gerald's actions. Marcus, Desiree's son, stopped by after his target shift and showed Winston how to add photographs to the spreadsheet cells. Images of declined payment receipts next to Miguel's statement. Copies of certified mail logs next to Tom's testimony. This is really cool, Mr. C, Marcus said, genuinely impressed. You're building like a whole database. Winston realized the teenage boy was right. They weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were building a case. The call came Friday morning at 10:37. Winston answered on the second ring, his engineer's precision extending to phone habits. Mr. Carmichael, this is Dennis Warren from Wells Fargo's investigation unit. We're calling regarding your fraud complaint filed April 26th. Winston activated speakerphone. Evelyn moved closer. Desiree, preparing lunch in the kitchen, went completely still. We've completed our investigation, Warren continued. We're reversing the account freeze effective immediately and removing Gerald Hutchins as authorized representative. We found irregularities in the power of attorney execution, rushed signing, inadequate witness verification, notary from Mr. Hutchins's own office. Winston's hands started shaking, but this time from vindication rather than fear. Warren wasn't finished. We also identified unauthorized transfers totaling $43,000 to accounts connected to Mr. Hutchins's business operations. These transfers occurred between February and April, concentrated heavily after March 15th. 3 weeks after Claire's diagnosis, Winston's spreadsheet had already flagged those dates. We're initiating restitution procedures, Warren said. You'll receive written confirmation within 48 hours. I'm also filing a report with the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. After they hung up, Evelyn cried. Not from relief, but from something fiercer. She'd been right. Her instinct that something felt wrong hadn't been confusion or paranoia or age-related decline. It had been accurate threat assessment. Desiree coached them through next steps. Request all findings in writing, ask about restitution procedures, get Warren's direct contact information. Winston documented everything in his call log, noting timestamps and exact language. Sarah Chen called at 2 p.m. The DFPI opened a formal investigation. They're looking at Gerald's entire practice, not just your case. Her voice carried warning. He's going to escalate. People facing investigations get desperate. At 4:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Winston opened it to find a process server with a manila envelope. Inside, a petition for temporary conservatorship of the person and estate of Winston and Evelyn Carmichael, filed by Gerald Hutchins. The petition claimed they were vulnerable to exploitation by household staff exercising undue influence, and unable to manage financial affairs without professional oversight. It requested immediate removal of unlicensed caregiver Desiree Thompson from their household, an appointment of a professional conservator pending full hearing. Court date, 18 days. Winston read the document twice, his blood pressure rising with each paragraph. This wasn't about frozen accounts anymore. This was about autonomy, competence, their fundamental right to make decisions about their own lives. Desiree read the petition with forensic attention, her jaw tight. When she looked up, something fierce had settled in her expression. Now we go to war. The conservatorship petition devastated Evelyn in ways the frozen accounts hadn't. She could understand financial confusion. Systems were complex. People made mistakes. But this attacked something essential, her competence as a person. Friday night, she couldn't sleep. The petition's language echoed. Unable to manage household tasks, appears confused about dates. Vulnerable to manipulation. Gerald was rewriting her identity, transforming her grief over Claire's illness into evidence of cognitive decline. Saturday morning, making coffee, her hands started trembling. The panic attack hit without warning. Chest tight, vision narrowing, the kitchen floor suddenly unstable. Winston found her gripping the counter, gasping. I can't breathe." He guided her to a chair, talking her through it with aerospace engineer calm. "Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. You're okay. You're safe." But his own hands shook, holding hers. When Desiree arrived at 9, she found them paralyzed at the kitchen table. The petition spread between them like a diagnosis. She sat down and spoke with absolute clarity. "You're not confused. You're not incompetent. You're scared. That's different." "The court investigator is coming," Evelyn whispered. "They're going to evaluate our home, our decision-making, and they'll see exactly what you've built." Desiree pulled out her phone, called Sarah Chen. "We have 18 days to prepare. Sarah's dealt with dozens of conservatorship cases. Most petitioners don't face clients with 3 weeks of organized evidence." Sarah explained the process over speakerphone. A court investigator would interview them, assess their living situation, evaluate their capacity to make informed decisions. The good news is, you've already been documenting your competence daily. Your journal, Winston's spreadsheets, that's exactly what the investigator needs to see. Sunday morning, Logan Airport appeared on Winston's phone screen. Claire's location sharing. She texted, "Flying home. Land at 6 p.m. This ends now." "You can't," Evelyn texted back. "You're not finished with treatment. I'm finished letting him do this to you." Claire arrived that evening, thin and exhausted, wearing a Red Sox cap over hair loss from chemotherapy. She walked into their dining room, expecting to find broken parents who needed rescue. Instead, she found Command Central. Organized folders, timeline poster board, witness statements, Winston's laptop displaying the master spreadsheet, Desiree's 3-ring binder of California elder law statutes. Her parents weren't waiting to be saved. They were fighting back with systematic precision. Claire set down her suitcase, studied their work, and felt something fundamental shift. Her cancer diagnosis had made her their protector by default. But looking at their evidence, their competence made visible, she realized she'd been wrong about who needed protecting. "Show me everything," she said. Monday morning arrived with Sarah Chen and a litigation strategy that felt more like exam preparation than legal defense. She spread materials across the dining table: sample conservatorship questionnaires, capacity assessment protocols, case law excerpts highlighted in yellow. "The court investigator will arrive Wednesday at 10, Sarah explained. "Maria Reyes has conducted over 300 capacity evaluations. She'll interview you separately and together, assess your living environment, review your documentation. Winston took notes in his engineer's shorthand. Evelyn listened with librarian focus, already organizing Sarah's points into mental categories. What she's evaluating, Sarah continued, is decision-making capacity. Can you understand information, appreciate consequences, communicate choices? Your documentation already proves all three, but she needs to observe you directly. Desiree created visible systems throughout the house. Meal planning charts appeared on the refrigerator. Winston's engineering precision applied to weekly menus. Medication schedules lived in labeled pill organizers Evelyn maintained with timestamps. The dining room command central stayed intact, evidence of organizational competence rather than chaos. Tuesday evening, the doorbell started ringing. First, Barbara Hastings, their neighbor, carrying a handwritten letter. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I repeated Gerald's narrative without questioning it. I'm writing a character statement for the court." Tom, the mail carrier, arrived with a typed affidavit describing 19 years of consistent, courteous interactions. "You've never missed a package pickup. You always know which magazines you're expecting. That's not confusion. That's clarity." Miguel brought Rosa, who'd met the Carmichaels at a neighborhood barbecue 2 months earlier. Evelyn was explaining Claire's treatment options, Rosa recalled in her statement. She understood staging, prognosis, clinical trials. That conversation was medically sophisticated. Wednesday at 10 a.m. Precisely, Maria Reyes arrived carrying a tablet and assessment forms. She interviewed Winston first in his den, asking him to explain his spreadsheet methodology, describe recent current events, walk through a hypothetical financial decision. Winston's answers were methodical, precise, demonstrating the same systematic thinking he'd applied to aerospace engineering for 40 years. With Evelyn, Maria reviewed the daily journal, asked about the timeline creation process, requested Evelyn explain how she'd organized witness statements. Evelyn's librarian training shone through. Proper citations, chronological coherence, source verification. Together, they walked Maria through their evidence system. Winston explained his data analysis identifying Gerald's unauthorized transfers. Evelyn described her research into California elder abuse statutes. They presented not as victims needing rescue, but as competent people who'd been deliberately targeted and had systematically fought back. Maria spent 3 hours in their home. When she left, she looked at them directly. "I'll submit my report Friday, but I can tell you, competence isn't about never being vulnerable. It's about how you respond when someone exploits that vulnerability. What you've built here is remarkable." Thursday evening, Sarah returned with their hearing strategy mapped on index cards. Winston and Evelyn would testify first, presenting evidence chronologically. Claire would speak to their support during her treatment. Desiree would testify last. The lightning rod Gerald had tried to make her. They had 3 days until the hearing. The evidence was ready. Now, they needed to be. Pasadena Superior Court's probate department occupied a renovated 1920s building where morning light filtered through tall windows onto worn wooden benches. The Carmichaels arrived at 8:30, Sarah Chen beside them, Claire and Desiree following. Gerald sat across the aisle with Martin Vickers, his attorney. Expensive suit, leather briefcase, the practiced ease of someone who'd defended professional misconduct before. Gerald wouldn't meet Winston's eyes. Judge Patricia Mendoza took the bench at 9 sharp. 62, salt and pepper hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. Sarah had whispered her reputation, fair but exacting, skeptical of conservatorship petitions filed by parties with financial interests. Vickers stood to present Gerald's case with polished confidence. "Your Honor, This petition concerns two elderly individuals, both 78, recently traumatized by their daughter's stage 3 breast cancer diagnosis. The Carmichaels reached out to my client, their trusted financial advisor of 22 years, seeking help managing affairs they felt overwhelmed by during this crisis. He painted a picture of confused elders, panicked phone calls, grateful acceptance of Gerald's protective power of attorney. Then he pivoted to Desiree, unlicensed household staff who'd systematically alienated the Carmichaels from their longtime advisor, exploiting their vulnerability to exercise undue influence. Gerald testified with practiced sincerity. He described receiving desperate calls from Winston after Claire's diagnosis. The rushed signing? They insisted. They wanted protection in place immediately. The frozen accounts? Standard procedure when clients show signs of financial confusion. The unauthorized transfers? Administrative fees they'd previously authorized verbally. His voice carried paternal concern. I've known Winston and Evelyn for over 2 decades. Watching their decline has been heartbreaking. When this young woman appeared, he gestured toward Desiree without looking at her, and began turning them against me. I realized they needed formal protection, not from me, from exploitation. Cynthia Park, the notary, testified next. The signing was completely routine, she insisted. The Carmichaels seemed grateful for Mr. Hutchins's assistance. No, she hadn't ensured they understood the document's implications. That wasn't her role. Vickers produced Gerald's phone logs showing multiple calls from Winston in late March. Evidence of dependency and distress. He showed photographs of the Carmichaels' dining room. Their organized evidence system deliberately framed as chaotic paper spread indicating confusion. His closing framed everything through Gerald's narrative. Frightened elderly people, opportunistic caregiver, well-meaning advisor trying to protect clients from themselves. Judge Mendoza's expression revealed nothing. She made notes, asked pointed questions about timeline discrepancies, requested clarification on the notarization process. When Vickers finished, she looked at Sarah Chen. Counsel, your response? Sarah stood, carrying the timeline poster board. Your Honor, the petitioner asks you to believe my clients are incompetent. Their evidence will demonstrate otherwise. Winston felt Evelyn's hand find his under the table. Across the aisle, Gerald finally looked at them. And for the first time, Winston saw fear in his advisor's eyes. Their turn to testify. Their turn to present receipts. Sarah Chen stood and positioned the timeline poster board on an easel facing Judge Mendoza. Evelyn's library training evident in every carefully labeled entry, every color-coded connection between Gerald's actions and the Carmichaels' documented responses. Your Honor, the petitioner asks you to believe my clients are incompetent, Sarah began. Their evidence tells a different story. Winston took the stand first. Sarah guided him through their documentation with questions designed to showcase his systematic approach. He explained his spreadsheet methodology, how he'd tracked every phone call with timestamps, how he'd identified unauthorized transfers totaling $43,000, how he'd cross-referenced transaction dates with Claire's medical timeline. Judge Mendoza interrupted. Mr. Carmichael, can you explain the formula you used in column E? Winston's engineer precision took over. Column E calculates days elapsed between transaction and notification. The formula is equals cell B2 minus cell A2, formatted as number rather than date. It revealed a pattern. Transfers accelerated as Claire's treatment intensified, suggesting Mr. Hutchins exploited our emotional distress systematically. Vickers objected to speculation. but the judge overruled. Winston's technical competence was undeniable. Evelyn testified next, presenting her daily journal. She read entries demonstrating awareness of current events, detailed accounts of conversations with Claire's oncologist, completed crossword times that remained consistent throughout the crisis. Then she presented witness statements, each properly cited with dates and notarized signatures. "This is from Miguel Rodriguez, our gardener of 12 years, she explained. "He witnessed Mr. Hutchins's rushed visit through our dining room window. This is from Tom Chen, our mail carrier of 19 years, documenting the unusual volume of certified letters from Mr. Hutchins's office. This is from Rosa Rodriguez, a hospice nurse who attended a neighborhood gathering where I discussed Claire's treatment options with medical sophistication." Her librarian's gift for organization transformed raw testimony into narrative coherence. Claire took the stand wearing a scarf over thinning hair. "My parents researched clinical trials when I was too overwhelmed to think clearly. They asked my oncologist questions I hadn't thought to ask. They maintained their household, paid their bills, supported me through video calls where they were present and engaged. The only confusion in this situation was manufactured by Mr. Hutchins to exploit our crisis." Finally, Desiree testified. She presented her paralegal coursework, her community college transcripts, her mother's case that motivated her advocacy. "I recognized the language on page 1 immediately," she said. "Durable financial power of attorney obtained during family medical crisis through rushed signing with notary from the petitioner's own office. Classic exploitation pattern. I didn't make decisions for Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael. I taught them how to document, how to report fraud, how to build evidence. I showed them the tools. They did the work." Sarah asked her final question. "Ms. Thompson, did you exercise undue influence over the Carmichaels?" "No. I witnessed their competence and gave them the information they needed to defend it. That's advocacy, not influence." Judge Mendoza made notes, her expression thoughtful. Gerald's attorney would give closing arguments next, but the evidence spoke for itself. Receipts always did. Vickers stood for his closing argument, his expensive suit and practiced gestures designed to project authority. "Your Honor, we have here 2 elderly individuals, 78 years old, recently traumatized by their daughter's cancer diagnosis. Yes, they've created impressive documentation, but who coached that documentation? Who provided the legal knowledge? The paralegal student who arrived in their home and systematically alienated them from their trusted advisor of 2 decades. He pointed to Desiree without looking at her. This young woman recognized vulnerability and exploited it. She taught them what to say, what to document, how to perform competence for this court. Mr. Hutchins, meanwhile, has served the Carmichaels faithfully since 2003. He sought only to protect them during crisis. His decades of ethical service speak louder than coached testimony." Sarah Chen rose for rebuttal, her voice steady. "The petitioner asks you to believe my clients are incompetent. Let's examine that claim. Incompetent people don't create detailed spreadsheets tracking financial fraud across multiple accounts. They don't maintain daily journals documenting their cognition. They don't systematically collect witness statements and organize evidence chronologically." She gestured to their documentation. "Mr. Vickers claims they were coached. But coaching requires a student capable of learning, implementing, and executing complex tasks. That's competence, Your Honor. The petitioner claims Mr. Hutchins acted in their best interest. Yet he transferred $43,000 to his own accounts without authorization. He claims they begged for help. Yet he rushed their signatures with a notary waiting in his car. He claims they're confused, Yet they navigated the legal system, engaged pro bono counsel, and built a case that convinced Wells Fargo's fraud unit to reverse its findings and launch a criminal investigation. Sarah paused, letting that sink in. Your Honor, these people aren't incompetent. They're competent victims of financial exploitation who fought back intelligently. The evidence proves it. Judge Mendoza reviewed the materials before her. Winston's spreadsheets, Evelyn's timeline, witness statements, Maria Reyes's investigator report, Wells Fargo's fraud findings. The courtroom held collective breath. Finally, she spoke. The petition for conservatorship is denied. The evidence demonstrates clear decision-making capacity, organizational competence, and rational response to documented financial exploitation. Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael, you understand the nature of conservatorship proceedings? Yes, Your Honor, they answered together. You comprehend the implications of today's ruling? We do. The court finds Mr. Hutchins's power of attorney was obtained through undue pressure during a period of family crisis, exploiting emotional vulnerability for financial gain. The POA is formally revoked. I'm referring this matter to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution under California Welfare and Institutions Code Section 15,650. Financial elder abuse. She looked directly at Winston and Evelyn. You're free to manage your affairs as you see fit. Gerald's face went white. Vickers began an objection, but Judge Mendoza had already stood. Outside the courthouse, Winston held Evelyn's hand. Claire wrapped her arms around both parents. Desiree stood slightly apart, professional to the end, until Evelyn pulled her into the embrace. They'd won with spreadsheets and witness statements, with documentation and receipts, with competence made visible. 3 Sundays after the ruling, the Carmichaels' dining room table served its intended purpose again. No more command central, no more evidence folders. Just dinner for 10. Winston carved the roast, paid for with accounts now fully restored. Wells Fargo's $43,000 restitution deposited with formal written apologies. Claire set out plates, her movements still careful but stronger. Radiation treatments were going well. Her scans showed no new growth. Marcus arrived with his laptop, immediately gravitating to Winston's den where they were building something together. A database called Financial Exploitation Red Flags that Sarah Chen would deploy through Legal Aid's Elder Advocacy Program. Marcus's coding skills met Winston's systematic thinking, creating a tool that transformed their experience into protection for others. Miguel and Rosa brought homemade tamales. Winston had paid Miguel for that first declined morning, with interest and a formal apology. Miguel had waved it off, but Winston's engineer precision required proper accounting. Tom, the mail carrier, arrived with his partner David, both carrying wine and stories about neighborhood gossip that had shifted dramatically. Barbara Hastings had apologized publicly at the last block association meeting, her contrition genuine enough that Evelyn had forgiven her. Sarah Chen was the last to arrive, carrying her case files. She and Desiree were collaborating on something, a workshop series for legal aid clients on self-advocacy and documentation. Desiree's paralegal program accepted her with a full scholarship, the Dorothy Thompson Memorial Scholarship for Elder Advocacy, established by Winston and Evelyn in her mother's name. As they ate, Marcus asked Evelyn about her library career. She pulled out photos, told stories about the archive system she'd built, the researchers she'd helped. Claire watched her parents, not the people she'd left in crisis, but who they'd become through it, enlarged rather than diminished. Desiree raised her glass. 2 witnesses. The people who show up and see the truth. Winston smiled, correcting gently. 2 receipts. Evidence matters. They laughed. Claire caught Desiree's eye across the table, mouthing, "Thank you." Desiree nodded slightly. She'd given them tools. They'd done the work. Gerald Hutchins faced 3 felony counts under California elder abuse statutes. The California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation had suspended his license pending investigation. 2 other victims had come forward with similar stories, their own documentation less complete, but their patterns matching. But that was outside this room, this table, this family that wasn't what they'd lost, but what they'd built. Sunday dinners with people who'd shown up when it mattered. With teenagers teaching Excel and mail carriers providing testimony, and caregivers who empowered rather than controlled. Evelyn looked around the table, this new configuration they'd created from crisis and competence, and felt something settle that had been restless for months. They were okay. They were safe. They were surrounded by witnesses who'd seen their truth and helped them prove it. The dining room table, once battlefield, now held only dinner and laughter and the quiet satisfaction of justice served with proper documentation. Receipts always mattered, but so did the people who helped you gather them.